Snow had never felt so cold. I stood outside Elias's apartment long after the door had closed. The wooden door remained only a few steps away, yet it felt farther than the palace itself. Inside, the man I loved believed I had betrayed him. Outside, I carried a kingdom on my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I wished I had never been born a prince. The guards waited several meters behind me beside the royal carriage. Neither of them dared to speak. They knew better. I lowered my eyes to my hand. Between my fingers rested a small blue paper crown. The edges were bent. One side had been carefully taped together after Noah accidentally tore it while pretending to fight dragons. I had carried it every day since he gave it to me. A future king, keeping a paper crown in the inner pocket of his royal coat. The council would have laughed. My father would have called it childish. But to me, it was worth more than every jeweled crown locked inside the royal treasury, because Noah had given it to me without expecting anything in return, and Elias had smiled at me as though I were simply another man, not an heir, not a symbol, not a political tool. Just Kylus, the only version of myself I had ever truly wanted to be. My lord. The captain of the royal guard approached carefully. The council has assembled. I know. They are waiting. They can continue waiting. He hesitated. Your father is furious. I laughed quietly. It was a hollow sound. I imagine he is. The engagement announcement is scheduled for tomorrow. My fingers tightened around the paper crown. I know. Your Highness, the conversation is over. The captain bowed immediately. Yes, my lord. He returned to the carriage. I remained where I was, looking toward the single window where a faint candle still burned. Was Elias awake? Was he crying? Was he angry? Did he hate me? The thought hurt more than the knife wound hidden beneath my sleeve. It wasn't deep. One of the assassins had barely reached me before the guards intervened. The blood on my coat belonged mostly to him, but Elias hadn't known that. All he had seen was another secret, another lie, another reason not to trust me. Perhaps he was right, because I had lied. Not about loving him, never about that, but about everything else. And every lie had begun long before I walked into Bellamy's bakery, 6 months earlier. The Southern District? I looked up from the intelligence reports covering the long oak table. Across from me sat Chancellor Aldrin, head of the Royal Intelligence Division. He nodded. Yes, Your Highness. I picked up the worn folder he had slid toward me. The paper was old. The edges had yellowed with time. Across the front, one name had been written in black ink. Elias Hart. What exactly am I looking at? A surviving witness. I was told there were no surviving witnesses. There weren't. The Chancellor folded his hands. Until 3 days ago. He placed another document beside the first, 23 years earlier. A fire, an assassination attempt against Queen Isabel. Several royal servants killed, one infant unaccounted for. I frowned. I don't understand. The Queen entrusted sensitive documents to one of her closest attendants before the attack. The documents disappeared. Correct. We believed they burned with the palace archives. They didn't. The Chancellor met my eyes. The attendant escaped. I turned another page. A photograph. Not of Elias, of his mother, young, smiling, holding a newborn baby. She disappeared after the attack, the Chancellor continued. We believe she hid the documents before dying several years later. I slowly looked back toward the file. Elias Hart. Her eldest son. So you believe he knows where they are? We don't know. And if he doesn't? The Chancellor's expression darkened. The people hunting those documents won't wait to ask questions. Silence settled over the room. I already knew what he was implying. If our enemies discovered Elias first, they would torture him until they found the truth, whether he knew anything or not. You want me to question him? We want you to protect him. I looked at him. There is a difference. There is. And which one do you actually mean? The Chancellor didn't answer. That was answer enough. The first time I saw Elias, he wasn't in the bakery. He was standing outside a tiny grocery shop near the Southern Market. It was barely sunrise. I remained inside an unmarked carriage while my guards observed from the opposite street. Elias Hart, one of them confirmed quietly. I followed his gaze. A young Omega emerged from the shop carrying 2 paper bags. His blonde hair caught the morning sunlight. He looked tired, very tired. His clothes were clean but old enough to have been repaired countless times. He counted several coins before carefully placing the remaining ones into his pocket. Then he smiled. Not because anything wonderful had happened, simply because a little boy came running toward him. "Eli!" The child nearly collided with him. Elias laughed. "You'll trip. I got an A. I knew you would. You didn't know. I absolutely knew. You guessed. I guessed correctly." The little boy proudly held up a piece of paper. Elias immediately knelt to his height. His entire attention belonged to his brother. No servants, no distractions, no impatience, just love, pure and uncomplicated. The boy looked into the grocery bag. There are only 2 apples. There were only 2 good ones. You aren't having one? I don't like apples. The child frowned. You loved apples last week. I changed my mind. The little boy sighed dramatically. You always change your mind when there isn't enough food. Elias froze, exactly as he had later done with the strawberry jam. Then he smiled. I've become very mysterious. The child narrowed his eyes. No. I'm certain I have. No. I definitely have. The little boy suddenly shoved 1 apple into Elias's hands. You can be mysterious tomorrow. Elias laughed. The sound reached me even through the carriage window. It wasn't loud, but it felt warm. One of the guards cleared his throat. My lord? I hadn't realized I was smiling. What? Should we bring him in? I looked back toward Elias. He had lifted his little brother onto his shoulders. The child stretched both arms toward the sky, pretending to be flying. Elias spun around, despite clearly being exhausted. The boy's laughter echoed across the street. Bring him in? Question him? Interrogate him? No, not after seeing that. Absolutely not. My lord, we're changing the plan. The guard blinked. What plan? I'm going to meet him. As the crown prince? I looked once more toward the brothers disappearing around the corner. No. As someone who deserves the chance to know him honestly. The irony of those words would haunt me later. Because honesty was the one thing I could never truly give him. The following morning, it rained. I remember thinking perhaps fate had chosen the weather deliberately. The bakery windows fogged from the warmth inside. For several seconds I remained outside beneath the rain, watching through the glass. Elias was laughing. An elderly beta woman was pretending to scold him while secretly slipping 2 sweet rolls into his satchel. He thanked her anyway. She rolled her eyes. He smiled wider. It looked like home, a place I had never known. Palaces are quiet. People believe they are beautiful. They are. But they are also cold. Every servant bows. Every conversation has purpose. Every smile carries calculation. Every friendship has political value. Nobody argues over burned bread. Nobody laughs because a sock disappeared. Nobody tells the future king he looks tired, because no one sees him. Only the crown, only the title, only the power. Standing outside that bakery, for the first time, I wanted to be invisible, just another man looking for breakfast. So I opened the door. The bell above it rang softly. Warm air immediately wrapped around me. The smell of cinnamon filled the room. Then Elias looked at me. Our eyes met, and in that single moment, the mission ended. Whatever reason had brought me there disappeared completely. I wasn't looking at a witness anymore. I wasn't looking at a name inside an intelligence file. I was looking at the man who would quietly change the rest of my life. Elias, I whispered to myself. Without realizing it, I had already forgotten every question I was supposed to ask. All I wanted now was one cup of coffee, one piece of cinnamon bread, and another chance to see him smile. From that morning on, I developed a habit that my advisors quickly began to hate. Every sunrise, I disappeared. The palace servants believed I was inspecting trade routes. The ministers assumed I was meeting merchants. The royal guard knew better. I was going to Bellamy's bakery every single morning. "My lord," Captain Rowan sighed one day as we crossed the southern bridge, "the council is beginning to ask questions. Tell them I'm inspecting the city. You've inspected the same bakery for 12 consecutive days. I believe in consistency. I believe you're in love." I nearly walked into a passing carriage. "What?" "The guards have started placing bets." I stopped. "Bets?" "Yes." "On what?" "How long it will take before you smile at the baker again." I do not smile. Captain Rowan looked at me. Then he looked toward Bellamy's bakery across the street, then back at me. "My lord." "What?" "You've smiled more in 2 weeks than you have in the last 10 years. I had no response to that, because he was right. The strange thing wasn't that I smiled around Elias. The strange thing was, I never realized how unhappy I had been before meeting him. The palace was magnificent. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, gardens larger than entire villages, servants everywhere. It should have felt like home. Instead, every evening after leaving the bakery, it felt colder than the day before. The moment I crossed the palace gates, servants bowed. "Welcome home, Your Highness." Home. The word felt unfamiliar. Elias lived above an old tailor's shop where the roof leaked whenever it rained. Yet somehow, that tiny apartment felt more like home than the palace ever had. Perhaps home wasn't a place. Perhaps it was a person. One afternoon, Mrs. Bellamy caught me watching Elias through the bakery window while he played with Noah outside. She quietly placed another cup of coffee in front of me. "You love him." I nearly spilled it. "I beg your pardon?" "The blonde idiot." I. She folded her arms. "Don't insult my intelligence." "I'm not. You look at him like people look at the sunrise." Heat climbed into my face. "I think you've misunderstood." "Oh?" "Completely." She leaned closer. "Then answer one question." I nodded carefully. "When Elias laughs, does your entire day become better? When he looks tired, do you immediately wonder whether he's eaten enough? When he smiles at another customer, do you become irrationally annoyed?" I stared at my coffee. Mrs. Bellamy smiled to herself. "I thought so." She started walking away before stopping beside my table. "If you break his heart," she looked directly into my eyes, "I'll break your legs." Then she disappeared back into the kitchen. I couldn't help laughing. It had been years since someone threatened the crown prince. Oddly enough, I found it comforting. A week later, I learned something that made my chest ache. Elias believed I came from an ordinary merchant family. He smiled while wiping flour from the counter. "It must be nice." "What?" "Working with relatives." I looked at him. "My cousins drive me insane." He laughed. "But you still have them." "I don't really remember what that's like." His smile became smaller. "My mother died when Noah was little." He continued arranging bread as though he hadn't just shattered my heart. "My father left after that." I wanted to ask where his father had gone, whether he'd ever returned, whether Elias still hoped he might. But I already knew. People who waited never smiled the way Elias smiled. His smile carried acceptance, not expectation. So instead, I quietly asked, "Was it difficult?" He looked surprised. Then he laughed softly. Every day. There wasn't a hint of self-pity in his voice, only honesty. I thought I'd fail. But you didn't. No. He smiled toward the window where Noah was helping Mrs. Bellamy water flowers. I had him. I followed his gaze. Sometimes, Elias whispered, I worry I'm not enough. Those words stayed with me for days. Not enough. How could someone like Elias ever believe such a thing? He gave Noah everything. Not money, not expensive clothes, something far more valuable. Safety, love, a reason to smile. Things I had possessed all the wealth in the kingdom to buy, yet had never received myself. That night, I called Chancellor Aldrin into my office. I need a favor. His eyebrow lifted. Official? No. Dangerous? Hopefully not. Expensive? Very. He sighed. I'm already regretting this. I slid several documents across the desk. I need repairs completed. He looked down. A bakery? And an apartment. He turned another page. A leaking roof. Yes. A broken oven. Yes. Worn plumbing. Unfortunately. He slowly looked back at me. My lord. What? You do realize the Royal Treasury doesn't usually repair bakeries. It does now. The finance minister will ask questions. Tell him I ordered it. He'll ask why. I smiled to myself. Tell him. I paused. It's an investment. The Chancellor rubbed his temples. You've fallen in love. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. 3 days later, workers quietly appeared while Elias and Noah were at school and the bakery remained closed for cleaning. Mrs. Bellamy stood outside arguing with every single one of them. I never hired you. The repairs have already been paid for. By who? We're not permitted to say. I'll permit you. I baked cinnamon rolls. We really can't tell you. She eventually lost the argument, mostly because they had already replaced half the roof. That evening, Elias stood in the middle of the bakery looking around in complete confusion. The ceiling, Mrs. Bellamy crossed her arms. Apparently someone likes bread. The oven, works again. The windows, they don't leak. Elias laughed in disbelief. Who would do something like this? Mrs. Bellamy glanced toward me, only for a fraction of a second. Then she smiled innocently. No idea. I looked away before Elias noticed. He walked toward the front window and quietly touched the new wooden frame. I wish I could thank them. You just did. He turned. What? Nothing. I had spoken aloud without realizing it. The following week, I received another report. Noah Hart. I immediately looked up. What happened? Nothing bad. Captain Rowan smiled. Actually, he placed another document before me. The school principal requested to speak with the boy's guardian. I frowned. Why? The tuition. My stomach sank. Elias had never mentioned struggling with Noah's education. Of course he hadn't. He never complained. The report continued. 2 months overdue. Possible removal from school. I closed the file. When is the deadline? Tomorrow. Pay it. My lord, today. And the explanation? There isn't one. They'll ask. Tell them an anonymous scholarship was approved. Captain Rowan smiled knowingly. Another investment? I looked out the palace window toward the southern district. No. What then? I smiled. The future. Because Noah deserved to dream about becoming whatever he wanted, not about whether his brother could afford another semester. The next morning, Elias arrived at the bakery carrying a letter. His entire face glowed with relief. Noah got a scholarship! Mrs. Bellamy gasped dramatically. See, I told you the universe occasionally remembers to be kind. I don't even know who applied. Mrs. Bellamy looked directly at me. Neither of us said a word. Elias laughed. I can't believe it. Neither could I. Not because it happened. Because I'd never realized Helping someone quietly could make me happier than receiving praise ever had. That was the dangerous thing about loving Elias. He changed me, long before I admitted I loved him. Love has a strange way of changing people. Before I met Elias, every decision I made was measured by strategy. Would it strengthen the kingdom? Would it satisfy the council? Would it protect the royal family? Those were the only questions I had ever been taught to ask. After meeting Elias, I found myself wondering entirely different things. Had he eaten breakfast? Was Noah feeling better after catching that cold? Would Mrs. Bellamy finally admit her cinnamon bread was better than her apple pie? The crown prince of an entire kingdom. Thinking about bakery recipes during council meetings, if my father had known, he might have disowned me himself. My lord, the council chamber fell silent as I entered. The long table was already filled. Ministers, generals, judges, the chancellor, and at the far end, my father, King Aldrich. He didn't look up from the reports in front of him. "You're late." I was inspecting the Southern District. His eyes finally lifted. "You've inspected it almost every morning. It requires frequent inspection. It has one bakery." A few ministers shifted uncomfortably. The king leaned back. "Tell me, Kylus." His voice was calm, too calm. "What exactly have you found in that bakery that cannot be found anywhere else in the kingdom?" For a moment, I thought he knew, that he had discovered Elias, that everything was over. Instead, I simply answered, "Good cinnamon bread." The silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then Chancellor Aldrin coughed into his sleeve to hide a laugh. The king did not. "I see." "No, father. You clearly don't." He placed another document on the table. "The eastern provinces are threatening rebellion. I've read the reports. The Western nobles refuse the new trade agreements." "I know. The neighboring kingdom has requested a political marriage." There it was, the subject I had been avoiding. Princess Celestine, daughter of the Western Emperor. Beautiful, educated, kind, a woman I respected and did not love. The king watched me carefully. "The engagement announcement will be made before winter." I met his gaze. "No." The room became silent. Several ministers stopped breathing altogether. My father spoke very quietly. "Excuse me? I won't marry her." His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "You are the crown prince." "I know." "You were born for your kingdom." "I know." "You do not marry for love." I thought of Elias laughing because Noah had hidden a sock inside his school bag. I thought of the paper crown, the broken sink, the bakery, the tiny apartment that somehow felt warmer than the palace. Then I answered, "Perhaps that's the problem." The king's expression hardened. "The meeting is over." That evening, Captain Rowan found me sitting alone in the palace gardens. "You argued with His Majesty. He argued with me. I heard shouting. So did I. He sat beside me without asking permission, something very few people dared to do. You should tell him." "I can't. He deserves the truth. He deserves a normal life." Rowan sighed. "My lord. If Elias becomes known as the prince's mate," he already understood. The conspirators still hadn't been found. The royal investigation continued every day. Whoever wanted those missing documents would eventually discover Elias existed. If they also learned the crown prince loved him, Elias wouldn't become a witness. He would become a target. "I'd rather have him hate me," I whispered, "than bury him." Rowan looked toward the palace lights. "I've protected you since you were 15. I know. I've seen you survive wars. I've seen you survive assassination attempts. But I've never seen you afraid." I smiled bitterly. "I'm terrified." "Of losing him?" "No." I closed my eyes. "Of getting him killed." The next morning, everything felt normal again, almost. Elias smiled as I entered the bakery. You disappeared. I was working. Liar. My heart skipped. What? You definitely overslept. I blinked, then laughed. I did not. You look exhausted. I slept. No. I promise. No. You're surprisingly stubborn. I've been told. He handed me my coffee. No charge today. I can pay. I know. Then why? He shrugged. You look like you need one good thing today. He had no idea. No idea how badly I needed exactly that. One good thing. 1 hour without titles, without politics, without fear. Just coffee and him. A few days later, I finally met Noah properly. He burst into the bakery carrying a wooden sword nearly as tall as he was. Elias, I'm working. The dragon escaped? Again? It ate Arthur. Elias sighed dramatically. That's the third Arthur this month. I know. The kingdom can't keep replacing Arthurs. Noah nodded seriously. It is becoming expensive. I laughed before I could stop myself. The little boy immediately looked at me. You're the coffee man. The coffee man? You always drink coffee. I suppose I do. He marched directly toward me. Can you fight dragons? I've had some experience. Liar. I blinked. What? You don't have a sword. Elias burst into laughter. Noah crossed his arms proudly. You can't fight dragons without a sword. I'll remember that. He studied me carefully, then suddenly climbed onto the chair beside me. You make my brother smile. Time seemed to stop. Elias looked up from the counter. Noah. The little boy ignored him. My brother used to look sad. He pointed directly at me. But now he smiles when he talks about you. My heart forgot how to beat. So, Noah continued, don't be mean. There wasn't a single threat in his voice, only the innocent honesty of a child, but somehow it carried more weight than any order I'd ever received from the king. I won't. I mean forever. I know. You promise? I looked at Elias. He quickly looked away, pretending to organize bread that had already been perfectly arranged. Then I looked back at Noah. I promise. Noah smiled. Good. Then he leaned closer and whispered loudly enough for the entire bakery to hear. I think he loves you. Elias nearly dropped an entire tray of pastries. Noah. What? Mrs. Bellamy laughed so hard she had to sit down. I could barely breathe from laughing myself. Noah looked completely confused. I said something nice. That promise followed me home. I won't. Such simple words, spoken to a child, but I meant every one of them. I would never willingly hurt Elias, never abandon him, never betray him. The tragedy was that sometimes protecting someone looks exactly like betrayal, and I was about to learn that lesson in the cruelest possible way. 3 weeks later, the investigation finally uncovered the first real lead. A servant from the Royal Archives had disappeared the same night the Queen's documents vanished 23 years ago. His grandson had recently been seen meeting secretly with members of the Western Court. The conspirators were closer than we'd believed, far closer. My lord. Chancellor Aldrin closed the office door. We have another problem. There always is. Our spies intercepted a message. He unfolded a coded letter. Only one sentence had been translated. Find the Omega before the prince does. The room suddenly felt cold. How much do they know? They know his name. I stood so quickly my chair fell backward. They know Elias? We believe so. They know where he lives. We don't know. Find out. We're trying. No. I grabbed my coat. We're going. My lord, they don't get there first. That night, for the first time since meeting Elias, I ordered guards to watch his apartment, not openly, hidden, across the rooftops, near the market, at both ends of the street. Elias never noticed. Noah certainly didn't. Good. I wanted it to stay that way. because if they ever realized why soldiers had begun protecting them, it would already be too late. The nightmare began on Noah's birthday. I had promised him I would arrive before sunset. For once, I intended to leave the palace early. I had hidden a small wooden wolf inside my coat, a birthday gift I had carved myself over several nights after everyone else had gone to sleep. It wasn't perfect. One ear was slightly crooked. Noah would have loved it. I never got the chance to give it to him. Just as I stepped into the palace courtyard, Captain Rowan appeared, breathing hard. My lord. The urgency in his voice made my heart sink. What happened? The king has been attacked. Everything stopped. The world became strangely silent. What? He survived. Relief lasted less than a second. The assassin escaped. My stomach twisted. Where? The eastern corridor. Before he finished speaking, steel clashed somewhere inside the palace. Another shout echoed through the halls, then another. They're still here, Rowan said. They planned more than one attack. Without another word, I drew my sword. The palace descended into chaos. Servants fled through the corridors. Guards shouted orders. One masked attacker lunged toward me before I reached the throne hall. The first strike glanced off my shoulder. The second never landed. Steel met steel. The fight lasted only moments, but when the assassin fell, another appeared. And another. This had never been about killing the king. It had been about keeping me inside the palace. Hours passed. By the time the final attacker was captured, darkness had already fallen. Blood stained the marble floors. Not all of it belonged to our enemies. I tore off one of the assassin's gloves. His hand bore a black wolf branded into the skin. Captain Rowan's expression darkened. The Black Crescent. I had heard the name only in intelligence reports. An underground organization. Mercenaries. Political assassins. They worked only for those with enough money to buy kingdoms. Rowan searched the man's pockets. There. He unfolded a small coded note. Most of the writing meant nothing, until he reached the last line. His face turned white. My lord. I took the note. Only 6 words were written clearly. The Omega lives in the south. My blood ran cold. Elias. The assassins had never intended to kill the king. The palace attack had only been a distraction. They were already moving toward the southern district. Get the carriage! The horses nearly collapsed from exhaustion. I had never urged them to run so hard. The streets blurred beneath us. Every second felt stolen. Every heartbeat whispered the same prayer. Please, be safe, please. When we reached the Taylor Street, the first thing I saw was smoke. My heart stopped. A neighboring warehouse had been set on fire. People screamed, children cried. Residents rushed through the streets carrying buckets of water. Perfect chaos, perfect cover. They're here, Rowan muttered. We split apart immediately. Half the guards searched the rooftops. The others blocked every road leading away from Elias's home. I ran, not as a prince, not as a soldier, simply as a man trying to reach the person he loved. Then I saw him. Elias stood outside the apartment building with Noah clutched tightly against his chest. Mrs. Bellamy stood beside them, alive. Relief hit me so suddenly my knees nearly gave way. Elias! He turned, for one beautiful second. He smiled. Then an arrow flew from the rooftop. No! I threw myself forward. Pain exploded through my arm as the arrow tore through my sleeve instead of reaching him. The assassin cursed. Captain Rowan's sword flashed. The man disappeared over the rooftops. Everything became strangely quiet. Elias stared at the blood running down my arm. Kylus, it's not mine. The words came automatically, because I didn't want the first thing he remembered to be blood. I wanted him to remember that I had made it, that I hadn't broken my promise willingly. But when I saw the birthday cake sitting untouched inside the apartment, the candles already melted, I realized I had broken it anyway. Later that night, the physicians bandaged my arm. The wound was shallow. The damage inside my chest was not. I have to tell him, I whispered. Captain Rowan didn't answer immediately. Finally, he nodded. If you don't, he'll leave. If you do, he'll become a target. Silence. There isn't a right choice anymore. No, there never was. The following evening, I stood outside Elias's apartment once again, this time not as Kylus, as the Crown Prince. I wore the formal black coat embroidered with silver. The silver wolf crest rested against my chest. No disguise, no lies. When Elias opened the door, he froze. The color left his face. Behind him, Noah looked from me to the royal guards with wide eyes. I knew it. Mrs. Bellamy muttered from somewhere inside the apartment. No one has shoulders that expensive. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Elias, I know they called you my lord. Yes. So, who are you? I placed my signet ring on the table. My name is Kylus Arden Valerius. I am the Crown Prince. Silence. You lied to me, Elias whispered. I lied about my title. Everything else was real. I still love cinnamon bread. I still drink coffee with 1 sugar. And I still love you. I unfolded Noah's worn blue paper crown. I've carried this every day. You kept it? I always will. Then I told him everything. The conspiracy, the hidden guards, Noah's scholarship, the repairs, and why I missed his birthday. When I finished, Elias asked quietly, when did you stop pretending? The moment you offered me cinnamon bread. A tear slipped down his cheek. I wanted to hate you, but I never stopped loving Kylus. Before I could answer, he kissed me. Months later, Bellamy's bakery was thriving. Elias became Mrs. Bellamy's partner. Noah proudly wore his baker's apron, and I still stole cinnamon bread whenever I could. One day, Noah placed his old blue paper crown on our son's head. Every king needs a crown. Elias laughed and took my hand. Looking at our family, I finally understood. A crown can inherit a kingdom, but only love can make a place feel like home.